Hi, guys. So, this is my first year as an elementary school librarian, and in my district, the collection policy states that we are to weed our collections on kind of a rotating basis. So, for this year, we are supposed to weed the 500s, the 600s, the 900s, and our fiction sections. And so, I chose for this assignment to focus on the 500s because that is one of the most overwhelming sections for me right now. And I knew sort of going into it based on kind of like minimal observations that there was going to be some issues there and some work to be done. So I ran a title wise analysis on my whole collection through Tidal Wave, and then I drilled into just the 500s. And what I found was that in the 500s, there are 1,500 items from my collection, and there were 606 items that were considered aged, and the average age of the items in this section was 2006. So, my general impression, kind of up front, was that my suspicions were correct, and this is a section in my library that could really use some heavy weeding. Not sure exactly what the criteria in TitleWise was to classify a title as aged, but the textbook says a 10-year window for most of the ranges in the 500s, with Earth Sciences or the 550s kind of being the exception. So that was the metric that I used when I went into weeding this portion as well. And all of the 606 items that were flagged in TitleWise as being aged were more than 10 years old. The next criteria that I used when I was weeding was I wanted to look at the number of times that a book had circulated because I didn't want to eliminate a book that was older if it was still being checked out by teachers or students. So I ran a separate report in Destiny of historical circulation stats, and then I limited the dates to the past 3 years, which was a suggestion from the textbook. And then I also limited it to the items that have circulated less than one time in that time frame. That brought up 707 items. So what I did next was I reconciled those two Excel sheets in probably the least techie way imaginable. I just made sure that all of the columns matched on the two sheets, and then I colored all the cells on one sheet orange and copied and pasted the orange cells into the white Excel spreadsheet, and then I sorted by call number. And so that put titles next to each other, like watch out, watch out. And I saw that, okay, that was a book, for example, that was not only more than 10 years old, but also had not circulated in the last 3 years. And that kind of gave me an idea of the books that definitely needed to be weeded. I went ahead and I pulled all those books from the shelves and weeded them. And a lot of the books that I removed tended to be in the 510s. It was a lot of math books. That portion took a big hit. Another topic that seemed to take a big hit was geology in the 550s. And then another one was in plants. With the geology, I did kind of, because the textbook had said, well, the age of that is not as important. I did just kind of look at was more interested in the number of times it had circulated and the condition of the book in that portion. Interestingly, the space and animal books that I had were pretty highly circulating, and so very few books had to be weeded from those sections. Even if they were a bit older, I ended up just kind of keeping them. And then after I went through the aged books and the books that were uncirculated, I did go ahead and kind of think through that musty criteria for that acronym. And what I found is that misleading and superseded items were pretty much taken care of when we did the age sweep. And then irrelevant items were kind of taken care of by weeding out the ones that didn't circulate. And so when I swept back over the shelves with this acronym in mind, I ended up really just pulling a few books here and there that were pretty damaged. And I maybe could have fixed them, but it seemed like I would be spending more in materials to try to fix these items than was really probably worth it, based on how many more circulations I would get out of it. We don't have a whole lot of electronic databases, and we are not one-to-one on my campus, so I didn't worry too much about the elsewhere part of Musty. And I know that I could have weeded a lot of more books that fit any of the criteria, but I was trying to keep in mind what my budget for replacement is, because my whole book budget for this whole school year is $900. And I have pretty much spent all of it. So I didn't want to just aggressively weed this section and then not have books in these areas that people were looking for. And I also, this being my first year as a librarian on this campus, I didn't want people to be like, what is she doing going in there weeding all these books? So I did take a more conservative approach, but I still ended up weeding a total of 350 books in the 500s alone, which constitutes about a 23% reduction in this section. And I think that that is an indicator that this section had not previously been weeded effectively and was definitely in need of some pretty heavy weeding.